Hello everyone, and welcome back to TSN, or the SASUKE Nerds. I'm your host Shane, and today, we're going to be taking a journey through every season of A&W. No matter what season of the show you absolutely cannot stand, there is always one part that sticks out for the better in retrospect, or just in general, and that goes vice versa. Today, I'm going to be going through my picks for the best and worst part of every A&W season. Just to establish some ground rules, this doesn't have to be a specific moment in the season. It can be a trend, distinction, or really anything that stuck out to me. That being said, there are moments where the former is the case, because there are some moments that are either just that incredible or that appalling. Without wasting any more time, let's get into the list. Starting off with A&W 1. I know a lot of you will probably be wondering what I have as the best part. A&W 1 is known for being a joke, and while I don't think anyone has actual vile hatred for this season, there's probably about 2 people in the world who view this season positively. However, one thing that I will always give A&W 1 credit for is its addition to competitors' legacies, specifically Brian Orozco and Levi Muhlenberg. It's evident after watching the season that these two were the faces of America, as Levi completely dominated the entire season and became LMS. As for Brian, while he wasn't as strong, he was still comfortably Levi's right-hand man, and improved upon his previous SASUKE results. I just think this season played a nice part in building these competitors' stories, and if you can tell from the documentary that will hopefully stay the longest video of me talking about Ninja Warrior, I care about that stuff a lot. Now as for the worst part, the production value. All of it. From the classic qualifier obstacles like the barrel roll and spider walk, to the laughable back half of the course, to the literal beach episode as the boot camp. It was all a mess. There's really nothing redeemable about it, so let's just move on. Moving on to A&W 2, you could make an argument for a couple of things as the best moment. The finals in Japan being taken much more seriously, the upgraded production quality in the qualifying courses, and some notable competitors making their debuts. However, my pick goes to the debut of Matt Eisman. One of the staples of the show is his commentary, and I have to commend this season for being his introduction, as he fits the role like a glove. The worst part, and I think a lot of you saw this coming, is boot camp. It's not for the reasons you might think though. Yes, the Patrick Cusick situation was completely cringe and is probably the closest argument you can make for A&W being scripted, but I more so take issue with how boring boot camp as a whole is. The teams really don't have any chemistry, at least compared to A&W 3, and the challenges are pretty much a joke. At least in A&W 3, most of the tasks have the competitors tackling some form of obstacles in SASUKE. In A&W 2, we have half of the episode dedicated to the competitors handstanding on a wall. Riveting television, I have to say. A&W 3 is actually a very consistent and solid season, so to pick the worst part was a little hard. I know the obvious answer might be boot camp, but I honestly found it entertaining this time around. So instead, I went with the semi-finals destruction with the unstable bridge. Due to its poor construction matched with a windy day, it was near impossible to clear, which made for a pretty underwhelming result. It did create Ryan Stratus's badass clear though, which is something good. My pick for the best part though, is Stage 3. I think the results and competitors set such a strong precedent for A&W 4 and close out the first 3 seasons really well. James McGrath and Ryan Stratus, the breakout stars of the season. Paul Casimir going even farther than he did in A&W 2. And David Campbell, now being set as the frontrunner, with his heartbreaking ultimate cliffhanger fail. Speaking of the ultimate cliffhanger, this stage sets that obstacle up as impossible, which as a 6-year-old kid watching A&W 4 for the first time, made a big impact, even if I hadn't even seen A&W 3 at the time. As a lot of you might know, A&W 4 is my favorite season of the show. Some reasons I can defend, and others I probably couldn't ever. One of those reasons I can defend though, is how evenly edited and developed the season felt. I know some people give this crap, and yes, 24 episodes is a bit much, but I think that notion gets a bad rep. It's practically the same length as A&W 7 for example, with the same amount of city qualifiers, and close to the same hours as Vegas had there. Getting back on topic though, The editing feels very catered to both building up a lot of new stars, while also spending a ton of time on the competitors we know and love. Going into Vegas, there were so many people to choose from on who you thought could do the best, and I honestly think that's really cool. Speaking of, Vegas is also edited very well, and feels like we're really seeing the culmination of 6 cities with thousands of competitors. It's great. As for the worst part, I think you all know what's coming. Stage 2 was an utter disaster and is basically unforgivable. I'm not going to explain the story, but in brief, every obstacle was poorly constructed and arguably ruined all the buildup of the previous 23 episodes. As for probably the objective best season of the show, A&W 5 has almost nothing wrong with it. The season improves on the previous one in basically every level, so it was pretty hard to choose the worst aspect. However, there is one thing that has always left a sour taste in my mouth, and that's the amount of wild cards in Vegas. On one hand, I can kind of see where they were coming from. With only 4 cities, and if they had the same amount of wild cards in A&W 4 being 10, we would have had only 70 people in Vegas. So I can honestly get using more than 10, but using 25 wild cards is a bit of a stretch to say the least. This ruined some honestly shocking fails, including one of the best moments of the season, Brent's salmon ladder fail. As for the best aspect, we have our first tie. First, the massive upgrades the city qualifiers got. In A&W 4, I can understand the argument that with only 3 obstacles being changed across each city, sometimes only 2, it can get pretty repetitive. So A&W 5 took that and flipped the script completely. Each of the 4 cities had tons of different obstacles, with the only similarity being the quintuple steps, warped wall, salmon ladder, and spider climb. All 6 other obstacles were different across every city, with a ton of them being brand new. This became the staple of A&W qualifiers from this point as well, so I really have to commend A&W 5 for that. However, I'd say this is tied with, to this day, the best ending to any A&W season. Brian Arnold's final run is still one of my favorites in the whole show. It's nail-biting, landmark, and that fail is so heartbreaking but makes for such a satisfying end for a near-perfect season. A&W 6 is definitely one of the more polarizing seasons of the show. There's a lot of stuff that I can say stands as some of the best content A&W has to offer, while there's some parts that are just so glaringly bad. As for the best part, this season contains some of the most iconic runs in the show's history. From Jon Stewart's inspiring run to become the oldest person to clear a semifinals course, to Joe Moravsky literally breaking the rumbling dice and still going on to clear, to Drew and Flip's shocking early exits in Miami, and obviously, the 2 big ones. No matter how you feel about Casey Catanzaro, you can't deny her semifinals clear was monumental. And last but not least, my favorite run of them all, Kevin Bowl in the Venice semifinals. That entire episode is just pure gold to me, seeing everyone wipe out on Cannonball Alley, just to see Kevin Bowl, a rookie, annihilate it with that famous technique of hanging upside down, and go on to become the first clear of the day. As for the worst part, there's definitely a lot to argue here. The new obstacles and the qualifying courses were a massive step down from A&W 5, as well as probably the first instance of uneven editing, with it being really obvious which storylines the editors wanted to push the most. However, I have to give it to the absolute letdown that was Vegas. The first half of this season was honestly pretty solid, as the qualifiers were super entertaining despite some flaws I mentioned before. But Vegas sort of ruins all of that build-up, as the silk slider was designed so poorly, wiping out a ton of great competitors, old and new. As for Stage 2, it was basically a replica of A&W 4, but some parts were even more frustrating with how awful that metal spin was designed. And we end it with a pretty lukewarm result of Joe Moravsky getting LMS, which is a fine ending. I like Joe Moravsky, but it was pretty obvious with how much the editors were pushing Joe throughout the season. A&W 7 is probably the closest besides A&W 5 to being a perfect season. There were so many excellent parts of the season, and throughout the entire thing, I struggled to find any bad parts of it. So I'm happy to say that my picks for the best and worst parts both come from the same episode. The best part is just the first 95% of the finale. It feels like the culmination of every season up to this point, and it feels like the finale of almost the first era of the show. I have such a fond memory of watching this finale with friends. It was such a great time. So while it might be boosted by nostalgia, it honestly still hits to this day. You have no idea how cathartic it was to see Isaac and Jeff clear Stage 3 live. It felt like everything was coming together from not just this season, but the entire history of the show. That is, until the final stage happened. I don't need to explain how this nearly ruined what could have been the best season of the show. Jeff Britton's robbery is still one of the show's worst crimes, and it still hurts to this day. The moment really put such a wet and damp towel over the insane hype from the first 2 hours and 30 minutes of this finale, which is why I have it as my worst moment for the season. A&W 8 is one of the more underrated seasons of the show if you ask me, and my favorite aspect of the season was Stage 1. To start, it actually feels like a renewal. A lot of obstacles were replaced in favor of harder ones, and while I'm not a fan of obstacles like the propeller bar or broken bridge one bit, the giant log grip, snake run, and especially the flying squirrel are all big winners. And as it should be, the course did a ton of damage, taking out multiple big names from the previous seasons. Ian Dory, Kevin Bull, Brent Stephenson, and Travis Rosen's fails were all shocking. But of course, there's the most shocking of them all. Finally, we had Jessie Graff's clear, which was just so satisfying to see. After her growth 4 years in the making, this was what it had all been leading up to, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The worst part of the season, though? Some of the new obstacles were just straight up BS, specifically the wedge and the stair hopper. It's no wonder that the latter straight up wiped out the semifinals competitors. And then the wedge gets brought back for Vegas? Get out of here. A&W 9 is when we start getting into the seasons that I'm not too fond of. However, there is one addition that I absolutely love, one obstacle that honestly carries the worst part of the season, the Double Dipper. It's placed perfectly on the stage, brings so much tension, and is fun to watch every single time. Plus, it's a ninja killer and caused a lot of shocking fails. I will say though, Alyssa Beard's clear was also a really great moment, so that'd be the runner-up. The worst part? Everything else about Vegas. Let's start with Stage 1. So despite the Double Dipper being here, we somehow managed to get the most clears out of any A&W season on Stage 1. To me, this is just embarrassing. 2 tournaments after a renewal, we get a clear rate that exceeds the one of the tournament where there was a renewal. So at this point, you'd probably think, okay, I guess everyone's just gonna annihilate the course and we get at least a final stage, right? Nope. Instead, one obstacle, Wingnut Alley, kills the entire field, and we get only 3 people on Stage 3. And then Stage 3 is really just an underwhelming 20 minutes, with Joe Moravsky getting LMS. A cool moment, but again, the build up to that moment was just so incoherent, it's not very satisfying. A&W 10 is definitely one of the more negatively received seasons, for numerous reasons. It blends in heavily with the past 2 seasons, the constant ignorance of old favorites, and most of all, Vegas and especially the finale. I'll mainly focus on the finale, because it's easily the worst part of Vegas and is my pick for the worst part of the season. To put it bluntly, Stage 2 is either really boring, with basically static results from A&W 9, or super frustrating like Najee's Water Walls incident. And it all caps off with the absolute sleeper of a Stage 3, with Drew getting LMS after rushing the cliffhanger when production dangled a new prize award over him. So yeah, maybe the worst finale the show has ever seen to this day. The best part? Definitely the Mega Wall. There's a lot of innovations modern A&W has tried to do that have derived hard from either the show's original concept or just plain unfair. And when I mean the show's original concept, I don't mean a SASUKE blueprint. I mean literally just the competitors versus the course. However, the Mega Wall is arguably the best of the show's experiments. It's innovative, fun to watch, and a nice challenge with a risk-reward decision at stake. This led to a ton of the season's best moments as well, so I'll definitely thank it for that. A&W 11, maybe the most divisive season in the entire show. While there's one obvious factor that makes me believe that, it can't be ignored how split this season was. Some moments here were downright awesome, bringing me back to the glory days of how invested I was. And some decisions were so mind-numbingly stupid I can't imagine what they thought was going to happen. To start with the worst moments, we have another tie. First, the Angry Birds massacre. I just don't know what they thought was going to happen. Granted, it is kind of funny that the sponsorship obstacle is the one that nobody can get past, but that's the only credit I can give it. It makes the Baltimore finals drag and just appalling to watch at times. So yeah, that's pretty bad. Despite that, there's also the safety pass, which just speaks for itself. Conceptually, it breaks the number one rule of any ninja show. Fall once, you're out. With this new handy gift, you now get a second chance at either stage 1 or 2. And ironically enough, this literally saves Drew out of a stage 1 fail. So thank you, Safety Pass. We wouldn't have the most controversial win in ninja history without you. The best part of the season, though, was the massive improvement on editing. It's kind of hard to explain, but I just remember being much more invested in this season than the previous 2 when it was airing. I think due to Drew's victory, the edit actually tries to show as many stories as it can, and it honestly reminded me of the older seasons at times. One that really hit me emotionally was Travis Rosen's last run, which I loved how much focus it got. To see one of my favorite competitors, someone I grew up watching, actually get a deserved send-off was such a great thing to see. It's not perfect, don't get me wrong, but I commend Eleven's editing for how much more effort it had. A&W 12 is certainly not a popular season among fans, and I used to really hate this season for fully taking me out of the show. Looking back at it though, it's honestly pretty inoffensive, and I think it was just me growing out of the show. However, that doesn't mean the format isn't a big detriment to the season. Look, I get it. With COVID, there was just no way this season was going to have its normal format with Vegas. That being said, this format just does not work well for a main season. And honestly, if this was just a spin-off instead, I think people wouldn't be as annoyed. There was one moment in the season though that really struck a chord with me. That being Flip's story with his dog, Maui. As stated in his profile, Maui sadly passed away due to an autoimmune disease. This was clearly a hard loss for Flip, as losing a pet is obviously hard for everyone. But to see Flip turn that into a great run was a really touching moment. Even if this was one of his worst seasons in terms of results, I still think this moment gave Flip yet another reason to be super high on everyone's favorite ninja lists. A return to the normal format was held in A&W 13, but to say this season wasn't full of surprises would be an understatement. The biggest surprise being both my favorite and least favorite part of the season, the teen domination. To give it credit, this was a huge moment in the show, as it really felt like we were finally seeing a dramatic shift in competitor skill. A new era, if you will. The teens ruled the season, with Caden Lebsack being the number 1 star and making it to the final stage. However, I also felt like this concept was milked to no end on the season, where it was really the only story the editors were trying to tell. I think it could have been handled more subtly, but at the same time, I can understand it to an extent, given how big of a movement this was for the show. A&W 14 is probably the season I have the least to say about, as both of my points here are pretty straightforward. The best thing about this season... I mean, come on, what else was it gonna be? Flip's Clear was an absolutely magical moment, one that united fans of A&W from every time period. It was so great that our Discord server literally crashed when it happened. The worst part of this season, though, is the bad editing during Vegas. I didn't even watch this season live, but I distinctly remember the memes of Caden Lebsack getting slammed by the editing, Stage 1 being a mess with only 1.5 episodes to show 100 runs. And unrelated to the editing, but how can I forget the 5 finalists making the final stage, and all 5 failing a rope climb. For our final season, we have A&W 15, which unlike last season, brought a huge gimmick that dramatically changed the season. Ninja vs. Ninja on the main course. We've had Ninja vs. Ninja gimmicks before, such as the Power Tower, but they were pretty insignificant, other than it giving Drew the safety pass, but we'll ignore that. But here, they were just slapped onto 2 different parts of the show. This held what is easily the worst part of the season, being Ninja vs. Ninja in semifinals. To put it simply, it's a format that I hate being shoved into the main show, and this didn't change my opinion of it at all. I'd also include Stage 2 here, since that was the other place that had Ninja vs. Ninja. but at least the competitor talent was pretty damn good, so it made the races entertaining to watch. As for the best thing, in stark contrast to the last season, Vegas was honestly pretty good here. As I said before, the Ninja vs. Ninja was actually decent and created a lot of shocking moments. The editing was definitely an improvement above the previous season, and even as someone who hasn't watched the show seriously in years now, I was pretty entertained by Vegas, I can't lie. And that's it. Every season of A&W's best and worst parts. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you for watching. I had a great time talking about this since A&W is such a big part of my childhood. Even if I don't love it like I used to, I'll always love talking about it. What do you guys think? Is there anything I missed, or something you heavily disagree with? Let me know in the comments. See you guys next time on TSN.